Okay, so this is what we call the Afterburn. If you have comments or questions, you can go ahead and raise your hand. Otherwise, if you're online, you can go ahead and start typing something in, and then Kurt and Robert will take care of that on that side. Now, bear in mind, some of you online, if you're new to MTY and my teachings or my understandings of things as I teach them, there may be a lot of things you may want to talk about or ask that were touched on that were not directly part of the teaching. So please don't be offended if I or Robert or Kurt directs you to the teaching that covers that subject. Okay? And by the way, let's be fair. If you really want the answer, then go get the answer where the teacher sends you. Don't get the answer and insisting on a soundbite. Some answers cannot be given in a soundbite. What do I mean by a soundbite? 2 or 3 sentences, 2 or 3 minutes. Some things take full teachings. Some things take hours to make the full case for. And so you may need to go back and listen to something that might take you several hours of listening. And actually, I would venture to say, and please don't take this the wrong way, but you probably won't get it the first time anyway. That's not because you're not smart. It's because you have too much filtering. Okay? So you're not ready or able to receive. And it's simply a matter of the more you listen to it, the more it breaks through the filters. And so you may need to listen to this stuff not only once, but 2 or 3 times. And when you see something that's got 23 parts, you may get intimidated. Don't be intimidated. And you're reading a Bible that's got 66 books. Does that intimidate you? That's even more than the heart of the matter parts. I should have gone 3 more. No. Okay? Well, hey, Covenant is already up to 23. Who knows? Okay? But let's understand, if you really want answers, or you're just trying to blast through because you don't agree and you want to get your answers out there. If you really want to understand what myself or any other teacher is teaching about anything, then you ought to hear the teaching that covers it. If you disagree with anything that I've said, then you put out your teaching so we can all receive that information. Okay? And then we could also critique yours, like you want to critique mine. And that's only fair. Okay, who wants to go first? Okay, David?
Hey, I just wanted to thank you for your teaching. It was very good, and I appreciated everything that you said concerning the Hebrew underlying stuff. I thought that was awesome. And you whacked all the appropriate places that I've been dealing with all my week and the last couple of weeks. So thank you.
You're welcome. Appreciate that. Okay, who else? Okay, Rabbi Tom's got his hand up in the back. Okay, Rabbi Tom.
Thank you. When you mentioned about how important it is to retain what we've learned, I immediately thought, well, how do we retain it? And I thought of 2 Kepha, chapter 1, verses 12 and 13. Over and over, repetition, reminding. And I think the onus of being reminded is on us first. We have to remind ourselves to go over and over and over these things. Listen to a certain teaching 3 and 4 times, not all at once, but over a period of months, and just go over and over and over the basics. That's what came to my mind. I just wanted to share that. I hope you don't mind.
I appreciate that. Yeah, in that quote from Peter, Peter says, I take it as a responsibility that even though you should be established in these things, I take it as my job to remind you over and over again to help keep you in that place. And so, somebody said to me the other day that they've listened to almost all the teachings and they've come to realize that I've got almost 500 teachings that basically all say the same thing. I really say almost the same thing every week from different verses. It's because Yahweh says the same thing in different ways with different words, but essentially makes the same points every week. And so really you're getting the same information and the same points almost every week, but you're seeing it in Proverbs, you're seeing it in Genesis, you're seeing it in Matthew, you're seeing it in Peter, you're seeing wherever it is. And it really comes back down to covenant and relationship. Where's the mic? Okay, Christine?
In Proverbs 3:25, it says, "Do not be afraid of sudden dread." Does that mean fear?
Well, I think that when you connect it to the rest of the verse, It's talking about some of the things that are coming down on, because you have a lot of that happening from Proverbs times and going forward a little bit, where there are some calamitous retributions and things that Yahweh does, to people. And he says, don't be afraid, because it's not necessarily going to be something that's coming on you, even though you may be in the midst of us. Well, just like the tribulation. Okay, those sudden dreads that are going to come, you don't need to be afraid of it, because Yahweh's on your side. So that sudden dread may not have anything to do with your daily activity. We're talking about like calamitous things, like Babylon coming in or Assyria coming in, or what we see in end times predictions, prophecies of tribulation. He says, don't be afraid of sudden dread. It's coming, but Yahweh's at your side.
Okay. And I prefaced my comment with that question. I'm glad I did. Because ever since I was 14, I had a different translation, and the translation I have says that has the word fear in it. And so 2 years ago, almost to this month, exactly 2 years ago, I started praying this verse that the Father would not let me be afraid. And I didn't realize until today I was actually praying that he would show me how to walk in his ways, and the result would be to not fear. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're trying to say, but understand this verse, when he talks about, then you will know the dread of Yahweh. You would know the dread. I mean, that usually means some horribly calamitous thing has just happened. I'm going to bring famine. I'm going to bring pestilence. I'm going to bring war, so that people would actually have that proper fear and dread and understanding. He said, but you don't need to worry about it, because Yahweh's at your side. That's the point there. But this other thing that you were doing, for the reasons you were doing it, you wanted to make sure that you would have your fear under control. Okay? But then use the other verses we were talking about, like Matthew 6. Okay? We said, what's the point of worry? It doesn't accomplish anything. Okay? And you could then also use verse 26 of chapter 3, Yahweh's at your side. So what are you going to be afraid of? But Yahweh's at your side as long as you're making the best effort you can to do the stuff that's previous to that. Then you can stand on, why am I afraid? Yahweh's at my side. The verse, no weapon formed against me shall prosper, is only for those that are making that effort. But we do have a rampant problem with fear. By the way, I've said this many times, so you're probably not going to be surprised, but the entirety of this book is the life story of human beings dealing with fear and doubt versus trust and belief. I mean, that's the whole point of the book, is to let us understand how to deal with that battle. Okay, the battle out there is not good and evil. Okay, good and evil aren't fighting with each other. It's fear and doubt versus trust and belief. Because those who are in fear and doubt tend to do what Yahweh said not to do. That's where the evil comes from. But it's trust and belief, you do good. And so that's the battle of the book. Christine?
Well, I just wanted to, say that, yes, for me that is true. Over the past year and a half, 2 years that we've been learning how to walk in Torah, all that fear has just melted away.
Good. Amen. Listen, one less person walking in fear means my job will get a little easier, okay? So, because almost everything that I deal with in counseling is because something has triggered a fear, doubt, trust, whatever issue, Sarabeth.
Question. I know you probably put it in the teaching, but if you could encapsulate it for me. How do we change the ground that we are?
How do you change the ground that you are? Well, when you go back to the parable of the sower of the seed, you have to recognize the things that are in the other type of ground, and so you have to do your own plowing. Okay, so as we look in the parable, you've got that by the wayside. Okay, so make sure your ground isn't at the wayside, your ground is in the camp. That's where you go and focus on covenanting. Then you have the rocky places. So what are rocky places? Okay, rocky places have to do with pressure, persecution. So how you know those things affect you or not is about your ground. So if you're being bothered by and affected by pressure and persecution where it's causing you to stumble or to panic and all those other things, well, then you know that that's going on in your field. So you got to plow that stuff out. You have to get counsel and figure out, how do I get rid of those things? How do I deal with pressure and persecution in a correct way? Okay? Same thing with worry and deceit. You may have thorns in there. It's not like we're actually looking for real rocks and real thorns. You're specifically looking at worry, deceit that has to do with riches. We're looking for pressure, persecution. These are the things that may be in your field that have to get plowed out. You have to till that ground and get rid of that stuff. Okay? So that's how you do it. First, you got to recognize what's in there that has to be taken out. I don't know what you do what any farmer would do. You got boulders and things in your field, you get them out of there. Okay? You got all kinds of roots and thorns and stuff, well, you plow them out. Okay? Or you till them out or whatever you need to do. So go and do that stuff, but recognize what it looks like. He tells you what it looks like. Those that receive it immediately with joy, but wait a minute. Am I just excited about it or does it have roots? Well, we won't know until pressure comes. And you probably all have experienced this to some degree. If you've ever gone to a friend or family member, told them all about this stuff, or maybe they even came here and they got all excited, and then what did they do next? They went and told other people. I just went to this place and I just saw this teaching and it was so great. And then they shoot them right down, and because they have no root in them, they're gone. You did what? You went where? You're listening to what? Oh, what are you a this? Oh, what are you, a Jew now? Blah, blah, blah. And boom, they're gone. Okay? Because there's not enough strength of the root to handle all that. I can't tell you how many times people have come up to Julie, and I always know that it's like, we always go, I'll go up to Julie and I say, hey, did you talk to a new person? And she'll say that to me. I said, yep. They go, and I said, they're never coming back. She goes, what do you mean? They just told me this is the greatest thing they've ever seen. This is what they've been looking for their whole life. And those are like the magic words that never come back. Because now they're so excited, they're going to go talk to their friends and family members. Someone's going to blow them out, and we won't see them again. Happens almost every time. The person that comes and doesn't really say a whole lot, and they keep coming, and they're watching, and they're kind of sitting there like this, I like that person a whole lot more because they're less likely to get blown out. Because they're not opening their mouth until they understand what's going on and start applying it right, and then they keep it to themselves until they get some roots. So that person who comes up and says, hey, I appreciated services today. I think I might come back. That's fine. Oh, the person that's effusively, oh, this was the greatest thing I've been looking for my whole life. They're gone. Almost every time. I'm just telling you from my experience. Ask the Rebbe, and she'll tell you the same thing. Ask my wife. It's sad because I know they're really that excited. They're genuinely excited. But they're going to go home right away and start telling all their friends about what they found because they've been looking for it, but their friends haven't. But they naturally assume everybody would want to find this. Anybody ever have that experience where you go up to your friends and family members and you thought, oh, certainly they'll be excited about this? No. And some of you had enough root or enough conviction at that point to handle the, cold water that was thrown in your face when you realize the harsh reality that not everybody's going to be so excited about this. All right, who's next? Okay, Wayne.
I don't know if it's a connection or anything, but reading Proverbs 18, it says, she is a tree of life to those taking hold of her, and blessed are all who retain her. Took me back to Genesis. Took me to Genesis 3:22. And Elohim said, see, the man has become like one of us to know good and evil. And now at least he put his hand down and take also the tree of life and eat and live forever. So we may have that knowledge and understanding of what the Father gives to us through the Torah, the understanding, but unless we reach out the tree of life, we take that wisdom and apply it, we won't live forever. We won't get that blessing. So that's just something that I've seen. I don't know if it's connected, but that's what brought me back to that.
Amen. Now, I wrote it in my notes and I didn't mention it, but we'll put it on the afterburn because of these kind of connections that we're talking about. And look, if you see a verse that mentions the tree of life, then certainly some of the stuff that was talked about, if not all of it, about the tree of life is going to be connected in some way to what we just referenced because they want you to connect those things together. Yahweh wants you to make those connections. Rabbi Tom brought this up last week, and I forgot. I wrote it in my notes, and then I didn't do it. But in verse 15 of chapter 3, it talks about she's more precious than rubies. And so then in Proverbs 31, talking about the Eshet Chayil, or the Proverbs 31 woman, it talks about here in verse 10, okay? But it says, who does have a capable wife? For she is worth far more than rubies. So what is see, when you see things like this, you can say, wait a minute, rubies are being compared to wisdom in terms of value. So a capable wife must be a wife who's walking in wisdom. That's the connection. Okay, so we're not just randomly trying to decide what capable means. Okay? But we're seeing that the rubies, so you may want to do a study and figure out where are rubies mentioned in different places and how is it connected. Clearly in Proverbs 3, it's connected to wisdom being more precious than rubies. And then in Proverbs 31, we're told that a capable wife is worth far more than rubies. So what do we know is worth more than rubies? Wisdom. So if you have a capable wife, we're talking about a wife that's walking in wisdom. And so Rabbi Tom had brought that together last week, so I wanted to bring that up again. So we'll throw it in the afterburn. It wasn't in the regular part of the teaching, but that's fine. Okay.
So I wanted to come back to the wisdom, so don't let me forget because I get on this other thing. But I wanted to correlate the difference between relationship and intellect. And way back when we first started this journey, my pastor at that time, it was actually through him, who was a Sunday keeper, that I come to understand Shabbat. And how that happened was I overheard him saying that, well, the Seventh-day Adventists have that correct. And I was like, wait a minute, what do you mean they have that correct? Because I didn't know what the conversation was, but I wanted to know what they had correct. He said, well, the Sabbath day. And I said, what? He said, yeah, Sabbath day. It's not on Sunday, it's on Saturday. And I just kind of looked around like, what? Well, why are we doing Sunday? Long story short, it came back to finances and all this other stuff and keeping people in the seats. And that threw me even more for a loop. I was like, what? Who cares? If we're supposed to be keeping the Sabbath, that's on Saturday. Why are we keeping it? Not that we can't get together on Sunday, but why aren't we observing the Shabbat like we're supposed to? I had no understanding. I had no biblical, but because I knew that he knew it was true, that started me on that journey of, I need to be about my Father's business. I want that relationship. So that started me on that path of, and even to this day, and he's a very smart man. He could quote you scriptures from front to back and tell you where to find them. I've never found anybody, other than Rabbi, as quick to find verses in the scriptures, but he has no relationship with the truth. He has no desire to keep Shabbat. He has no desire to find out what Torah, and he gets emotional, and you can tell he gets emotional when you bring up, well, why aren't we doing this? Or well, that's because we're doing this, and we're going to keep doing it this way, and da-da-da-da. And you can see the blood rush up into the face and everything else. And that's when I was like, I don't know I can trust his judgment if he's in his emotions like this. So that was the difference between the relational and the intellect, which was profound for me. So thank you for that. The other thing was the correlation with wisdom. Going back to Proverbs 18, right where Wayne was, about the tree of life. You make the correlation, Rabbi, about the Torah and the way, the truth, the life. Could we not also synonymize wisdom and what else was it? There was something else in there too. Wisdom, no, it was wisdom. There was one other thing. It was wisdom. Hold on. I have to go back to my notes. The word, and it also related me back to everything that was created was through him and by him and for him. So wisdom could also relate to Yeshua and the Torah. And all of those things all circumferentially connect to one another.
All right, so verse 19, Yahweh founded the earth by wisdom. And then when we go to John 1, that all things were made through and by him. And so that must be wisdom as well. Great connection. Okay? But that's how we do connections. That's how we see it. That's the Ruach helping you say, wait a minute, that information was in my head, and there's other pieces in my head, and now we can connect them together. All right?
And the other thing that I had was the blood. Life is in the blood, and also that Yahweh created man in his image may not necessarily mean this physical, but that in the blood he put some of his image or his Torah written on our DNA. So the more we feed into that, the more we become more like him in the transformation process as we gain wisdom.
Okay. Okay, who's next? Okay, bring it to the live stream. See, I like what he said about intellect from the point of view, I've had people in the past say things like, well, do you mean to tell me that all those church fathers and all these brilliant scholar, Bible, whatever's are wrong and you're right? And I said, yes, not because I'm an out-of-control egomaniac, just because intellect has nothing to do with it. It has to be by revelation. It's eyes opened, ears opened. You can't just make an argument, but these guys are so smart, and they went to all these, seminaries, and they have doctorates of this and doctorates of that, so how could you know more than them? Because what does that have to do with anything? That's informational relationship. They only have a relationship with it as information. And so maybe they're smart enough to know where all the information is and what it all says, but that doesn't mean they know what to do with it. That takes wisdom. I don't know why this popped in my head. Some of you know this movie, some of you don't. But anyway, back way in a million years ago, I remember there was a movie called Real Genius. And in Real Genius, they were making a laser guidance system. And the real smartest guy of them all showed up, and he asked them, well, this optics that you made, what's it for? And the guy says, well, it can have an unlimited amount of purposes. And the guy says, no, actually, it really doesn't. Have you not thought about what this would be used for? And that's the kind of thing about information and intellect created this thing without actually thinking about how it would be used and what would be its purpose. And what they came to realize its main possible functionality was as a military weapon to snuff somebody out at a distance from the sky, and you could laser shoot somebody, whatever. But the thing was, intellect was creating this thing until one person finally asked the question, where's the wisdom in this? What is the point? And so I don't know why I'm correlating that, but it just struck me how that was a big deal, where you can get so caught up in how smart you are, because this movie was all about these genius kids and how they can make this stuff, but where was the wisdom in it? Okay? And so I think that's a good lesson for us. I'm not recommending the movie. This is when I was a young teenager or whatever. It's a terrible movie. But the thing is, understand that point, though. Here they were developing something, and these were supposed to be the brightest of the brightest intellect. But nobody was asking the question, what is it for? Okay, so Bible person knows all the Bible, and they even know Saturday's the Sabbath, but if you're not putting it to use, then the intellect is giving you no value. They're smart enough to know. They know intellect-wise, but where's the wisdom? Okay, because I've had people tell me all the time, well, I'm just not really I'm not that smart. I'm not a Bible scholar, so I'm not sure I can understand all this stuff. Why? It was written mostly to farmers and herdsmen, shepherds. Why are you so worried about it being like you have to be a Bible scholar? Well, because all these years, only these Bible scholars are trying to tell us what everything means. No, they were trying to manipulate you and control you into what they thought they wanted to have you do. A whole different thing. All right, Kurt.
All right, I'm probably saying this wrong, but I think her name is Tranessa. You mentioned in the sermon that a person does not burn or is tortured in hell. What do you mean by that?
Go listen to, actually, did I do that part yet? No, that's part 4 of the millennium. Go listen to part 4 of the millennium. No, that doesn't exist yet. Okay. I don't have a teaching yet to make this argument and prove it from Scripture, but there is nothing in Scripture to say. The whole burning in hell thing came from the Catholic Church and Dante's Inferno, which is a book written, in the Middle Ages, where they used as a way to try to describe this torturous burning hell. There is no verses that say that. There are some verses that are being twisted to make it say that, but it doesn't say that. Okay, Yeshua himself says in John 15, he says, those that do not stay in him are taken like the driest little kindling and thrown in the fire, and poof, they're gone. Okay, no burning, torturous, whatever, forever type of thing. The gift, let's make it simple. Go to Romans 2. See? Thank you, Ruach. I needed a verse. Okay? So Romans 2, And we'll look in verse 5. But according to your hardness and unrepentant heart, you are treasuring up for yourself wrath in the day of wrath and revelation and of righteous judgment of Elohim, who shall render to each one according to his works everlasting life to those who persist and do. So everlasting life is the good reward for those who persist in good work, seeking for esteem, respect, and incorruptibility, but wrath and displeasure to those who are self-seeking and do not obey the truth and obey unrighteousness. Okay, that whole thing is a process that eventually leads to, remember, everlasting life is a reward. So everlasting life, being tortured, is mixing reward with some sort of punishment. Okay, our Creator, our Elohim, is merciful. He's righteous. Torture is not righteous. Torture is not good. Torture is amongst the highest levels of evil. In His mercy, people get thrown in the lake of fire where they are snuffed out. They are eliminated. We have verses that say the dead know nothing. Okay, but what about in the verse that talks about, Abraham's bosom and all? That was a proverb. That was a story. That was not about life and death. It was about people coming from different parts, cultures of life and aspects of their focus and how that will be in the day of judgment from a metaphorical point of view. It's not a life and death parable. But anyway, there's a whole lot of stuff we could talk about and to make that point. But you need to do your own research to realize that you're welcome to worship a Creator that you think would torture people forever. I choose not to. My Creator doesn't torture anybody. Okay? My Creator, in His mercy, will put those people out of their misery of rebellion. So they get a choice of life and death. Okay. The Millennium and Kingdom teaching does touch on it somewhat, I think. Anybody remember, does it touch on that? Listen to it. It's called Millennium and Kingdom. It's 3 parts. I was going to get into this part even more in part 3, part 4, but we haven't done part 4 yet. Okay. That shouldn't be a spoiler alert. I'm not planning to do it next week, so. Okay, go ahead.
All right, Jana asks, as I understand, wisdom is listening to the word and applying it. So when you say retaining it, does it mean applying it continuously? Could you please expand on how we can retain wisdom?
I think I explained that for a good little 20, 30 minutes in there, but I'll try to explain it again. Retention comes from application. So, it's like, how much do you pay attention if you drive a car to thinking consciously about reaching over, looking for, finding your radio, turning it on, changing a station, or do you actually think about that and you have to remember to look in your mirrors, or do you just automatically do all this stuff? Over time, you don't have to go through the checklist that you were taught in driver's ed, or you were taught by whoever taught you how to drive. First drive, you start thinking, okay, I got to have my hands in the right place. I got to remember to check my mirrors. I got to remember about my blind spot. I got to remember about which is the gas, which is the brake. What am I doing? Okay. You have to remember all this stuff and think about it. Eventually, when you do it often, you've retained it and no longer have to think to do it, you just do it. Okay, a lot of you, when you started keeping Shabbat, you would get to Friday night and almost before sundown realizing, oh, I'm not ready. I didn't prepare anything. After a while, you get to the point where you don't have to worry about it anymore because you know to get prepared on Friday. And you plan your life that way, but it takes a while to get into that routine. And the routine has to do with where you then are retaining the information or the wisdom because you're now applying it consistently. Hopefully that helped.
All right, follow-up question from Jan as well. Also, discernment comes from wisdom, ? Always pray for wisdom and discernment. Should I pray differently?
No. Praying for wisdom and discernment is good, but recognize that it's the fear of Yahweh that's the beginning of all that stuff. So what you should be doing is going to the fear of Yahweh teaching. Make sure you understand that first. Because wisdom and discernment is going to come from the fear of Yahweh. And if you don't know what fear of Yahweh is, then you're not going to, that's the beginning. It says fear of Yahweh is the beginning of wisdom. So if you want wisdom, you got to start at the beginning. So I recommend you go listen to fear of Yahweh teaching. Okay? By the way, I should have mentioned this with that whole life, death, torture thing. Recognize that if you study the early church fathers, early church history, nobody thought that was going on until the Catholic Church threw it in there after Dante's Inferno, okay? That was not a thought. It was not being taught, even by the early churches, that you were going to go burn in hell somewhere. It took a long time before that got thrown in and became a part of the belief system. It was not originally in there. It came much later. Okay, go ahead.
All right, it's more of a statement than a question, but Freddie G says, you think the rocky places could also maybe be rocky teachings that may seem to be Yah's way, but could be walking on the fence?
Well, I mean, I guess they could from the idea that wrong teachings could cause you to stumble. So from that point of view, they can be considered rocks in your garden as well, or in your dirt, if they cause you to stumble, because the rocky ground was all about being caused to stumble, okay? Because you would trip over the rocks in the ground. So I guess from that point of view, I don't think that's the point that was being made in Matthew by Yeshua, but certainly they could act in that form. Okay?
All right. M2I Lakeview, this is an earlier discussion we had about changing the ground you're on. They referred to Jeremiah 4:3 and Hosea 10:12, which speak to this.
Okay, Hosea 10.
Hosea 10:12.
Sow for yourselves righteousness, reap according to kindness. Break up your tillable ground. It's time to seek Yahweh till he comes and reigns in righteousness. That's great. I like that verse. Okay? You've plowed wrongness and you've reaped unrighteousness, and now you got to make a change there. And Jeremiah what?
4:3.
For this is what Yahweh said to the men of Yehuda and Jerusalem, break up your tillable ground and do not sow among thorns. Okay? But then he goes, circumcise yourself unto Yahweh and take away the foreskins of your hearts. So there's a lot of you that needs to get out of that, get out of the ground. A lot of attitudes, a lot of beliefs, a lot of all kinds of things. Go ahead. That's it? All right. So look, I hope that's a blessing to everyone. I hope that everyone can take this before the Father and see where you are in all of this so that you can work on you and where you need to work. I know a lot of you have done like, man, I wish so-and-so was here to hear this. Don't ever do that. You were supposed to hear this, okay? All right? Or don't sit there going, well, I hope my wife was paying attention, or I hope my husband was paying attention. Don't do that. You need this for you. Whatever they needed, hopefully Yahweh will get them to pay attention as well, okay? But this was for you in whatever form you were supposed to get out of it.
Dad.